Hey everyone, Kevin Powers here. Welcome aboard. Doug, Simon, glad you both could make it, especially you, Simon. Little technical difficulty there. But hey, welcome everyone. First off, this is our first in a series of webinars for our Cyber National Security program here at Boston College, so welcome. This program today is Cybersecurity Risk Management, Ransomware, Planning, Response, Mitigation, and Recovery. We're going to cover a lot today, so before we begin, let me just give you some ground rules, and we'll go over some learning objectives, and then we're going to go right into it. So first off, ground rules: ask questions as we go along. Jump in the chat box, you ask questions, we'll get to them. You know, if they're pertinent to our discussion, we'll get right to them. If not, we'll get to them at the end. So we want this to be interactive as possible, so send those questions our way. Two, our learning objectives. So what's our goal today? So you know, at the beginning, you know what you're going to get. So I guess you can hang up if it's not relevant or pertinent to you, but it's going to be pertinent to you. So first off, we're going to identify and define the roles and responsibilities of the FBI as it pertains to cybersecurity. We're going to identify, define, and discuss current cyber threats, really threat actors, threat vectors, methodologies. Then we're going to discuss generally, and while using applied case studies, ransomware. What is it? How it works, including proactive strategies and recognize best practices to assist organizations in protecting your network systems and data, and to help you respond, mitigate, and effectively recover from a ransomware attack. And we're going to do all that in an hour. Okay, well, we'll try our best to do that in an hour. So with that, we have two great guests, two great friends, and I'll start off with, first off, we have Supervisory Special Agent Doug Doman. He's with FBI Boston. He's a Boston College alum. And Doug, if you could, you know the drill. You teach here now. Doug's a professor here at Boston College now. He's gone from a student to professor, and he was one of our very first students as well. And I'll just add this in too, Doug. I might as well give you some kudos here. Doug was if not one of our best students of all time. He in fact won the BC Graduate Award when he did graduate from our program. So Doug, with that, if you could just give us your background, your current position, and answer a couple of questions real too, is like, how did you get involved with cybersecurity? And since you've been involved with cybersecurity, could you give us a sense of how things evolved over time?
Yeah, of course. First of all, thank you very much. And thanks for everything you're doing, Kevin. Time and time again, I meet, colleagues out in the cybersecurity world that have that know you, and we're brought together because of the program. So thanks for everything you're doing for cybersecurity as well. I'm one of two supervisors at the Boston FBI field office. We've got the cyber task force that's consisted of a national security squad and a criminal squad. So I head up the criminal investigations of cyber actors. As you said, I'm a graduate of the program, and I think I've seen security evolve quite a bit. I started at Sun Microsystems over 20 years ago when I graduated from my undergrad, and at that time, Sun Microsystems had kind of a cadre of security experts that would kind of be on call for anything related to security that we would find out in the field when we were supporting the Sun equipment. And at the time, I remember thinking those folks were really smart. I probably didn't want to waste their time with something that wasn't very meaningful. And very rarely would I ultimately be able to offer that kind of a service to a client. So I would always seek their guidance and bring them in when I could. But I think how it's evolved is that it's become much more approachable. This whole field of cybersecurity has become much more receptive to newcomers. It's approachable. Every technical level has a role to play in cybersecurity. And so I think that, regardless of even where you're at in an organization, you have a significance to helping solve the problem. So I think that's one of the better evolutions and ways that cybersecurity has evolved that I've seen.
Excellent. Thanks, Doug. All right, now we're on to our next panelist. It's Simon Taylor. And I'll start off with Simon. Simon's a great friend. I've known Simon now for almost 9 years. And in fact, I hired Simon. That's what it was. He was a consultant. And I talk about Doug. Doug was one of our first students at Boston College, the cyber program. So, and to watch how much he's flourished through it. And Simon, he was actually there when I began building out the program. And he was one of the biggest supporters. And he's been there for me as a friend, colleague, and really a professional mentor in many ways, even though he's like 10 years younger than me. And as we move forward with data protection, data privacy in this whole cyberspace and national security. So Simon, with that, I'll give you the floor. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you, how you got involved with cybersecurity, privacy, and data protection, and how you saw things evolve.
Sounds good. First of all, Kevin, I might be 10 years younger. You look 10 years younger than me. I don't know what you're doing to keep in good shape, but you certainly do a great job.
Well, I have three, girls who put a lot of makeup on me.
But as Kevin said, I'm an entrepreneur by trade, and I've been in the IT infrastructure space for about 20 years now. When I first met Kevin, I was doing a bunch of cybersecurity consulting and working with, folks like Kevin as he was building out this program. I was the founder of a company called Comtrade Software about 15 years ago. Comtrade Software was a monitoring tool company. So we were doing infrastructure monitoring, believe it or not, for Citrix and VMware environments, sold into about 2,000 customers around the world. And then I sold that company to Citrix in 2014. I then started my third business, which was Haiku. And that Haiku is I'm the CEO and founder of Haiku. We are a multi-cloud backup as a service business that is entirely focused on simplifying data protection for mid-market companies around the world. We are backed by Bain Capital Ventures. We did an $87 million raise with Bain this year. And we're now in 2,700 customers in 78 countries. And we've got a 92 NPS score. And the reason for that is really simple. We keep data protection simple because we believe that it's the complexity that lets the bad guys in the door. So by making data protection as simple as possible and providing a true SaaS service that enables mid-market businesses to do that and enterprises, we've been tremendously successful in helping companies around the world to protect themselves from ransomware attacks.
Excellent. Thanks, Simon. No, it's great to have you both here today. And this is going to be, one of our top ones kicking off. And Doug, I'm getting a kick out of this because last year in COVID, we had our first webinar and was, we really were talking about ransomware. And I like how our backgrounds have changed. I think, I was like in a broom closet at my house, and likewise for you.
I do feel like the FBI should invest in some the brick wall facade behind me with some art like Simon has. That looks very comfortable. I'm very envious.
Yeah. All right. So Doug, if you could really, give us a sense, for many of our folks on board right now, what is your role as it relates to cybersecurity at the FBI? And, really, what exactly does the FBI do, both proactively and reactively as it applies to cybersecurity?
So we've got a, we're one of the organizations that are trying to help come up with a not really a solution, but a security profile for the American public. And I think our mission is to impose risk and consequences on cyber adversaries. But in addition to that, we're intelligence collectors. So out in the field, when an FBI agent or an intel analyst is asking for information, that is to ingest that information and then to push it out to the common good and protect the next potential victim who might be out there with similar vulnerabilities. So I think there's been a really big push, especially in the past 18 months with ransomware, to make that happen.
Okay, and can you talk a bit too, is really how you interact with organizations? A lot of folks think that, hey, I'm hit with a breach, or I think something's going wrong and I better call the FBI, and they think the FBI is going to come in and, then fix everything for them. Can you talk about a bit about what actually happens and what you can do and what your role is there?
Yep, of course. Yeah. So we don't arrive on scene with raid jackets on. We try to handle a lot of the initial kind of response over the phone, and ideally we like to be in front of the victim in person when we can, and that's for reasons of just our own identification, being able to be on site see what's going on, and then potentially collect some, triage the victim, patient zero, we call it, the initial computer or system that might have been impacted, collect some logs, and then, continue to be in touch with that victim, but allow them to recover, go through their incident response plan, and really kind of be a reference for them, a resource for the victim, by speaking to the case agent or the subject matter expert that might have some more context to provide to the victim while they're conducting their recovery, and most likely bringing in either their security team or an incident response team to help them recover. So we try to be victim focused in our response.
Right.
What we don't necessarily want to do right away is rush out there and start imaging systems. That was kind of a big misconception that we've had to kind of talk through and really figure out what the most efficient way of using our specialties and our expertise in the problem. And it's essentially really looking external to that victim's organization. There's a lot of, potentially there could be a lot of organizations, a lot of parties that are involved in cleaning up what had happened and the compromise. There's not many that are looking at the adversary and looking to see, how we can attribute this activity, and then what we're doing about those individuals who've committed that crime.
Okay, Doug, and if you could, and then I'm going to get to Simon here. Can you talk about, like, who are these threat actors? Who are the ones causing all this trouble? Who are the ones doing these type of attacks?
I think the best way to answer that is just by referring to what's being released by the Department of Justice. I mean, recently there was a takedown in Ukraine that the FBI participated in of CLOP ransomware subjects. As these ransomware investigations mature, we get closer and closer to the actors. And what we've seen is there's over 100 investigations at the FBI. We've tried to really be focused with our response and be efficient. So we won't investigate the same variant in two different locations or two different venues. We'll try to kind of be a little bit more directed with where those victims should be directed to, what field office, and then allow them to have that conversation and be able to provide, as I said before, some context to what that variant or that ransomware brand is known to do. But I don't think it's a secret that it's been in some of these ransomware brands, there's been a protection of what they refer to as the Commonwealth of Independent States. Those tend to be Eastern European and Russian criminals. But I would just really kind of direct everyone to what's being released by the Department of Justice, because there's some really, that's the latest up-to-date information is going to come from the Justice Department on that.
Yeah, and when we talk about those threat actors too, we're really talking about there's the cyber criminals, people who are just trying to make a buck, right? And then we have the hacktivists, so when we think of anonymous, so there's some political tint to there. Then we have the nation states, and that's what you've talked about too, which is a mix of the cyber criminals, but then the nation states in the background who are working with them, to cause damage or steal intellectual property. And then finally, there's terrorists who are just looking to do destruction. So, if you're going to break them out into the categories, would that?
Yeah. And that would be like a spectrum. And our squad, as I mentioned, we're focused on those financially motivated actors that are carrying out the activity.
Excellent. And, I would say the biggest threat now, I was going to ask that question, it's ransomware, right? And that's why we're here talking now. And
yeah, no question.
Yeah. And I'll, bring Simon in there. So Simon, what are we talking about? What is ransomware? Tell us what it is first, how it works, and then we'll go into some further questions.
It's a great question, Kevin. You hear the word ransomware all the time, or the term, and people don't often take the time to actually define it. It's really just any malware in which they lock up your data and then ask for a ransom to get your data back or give you the access back. And it's that locking up, freezing you out of your own data that is so terrifying for companies, because we always say at Haiku, it's not if, it's when, right? It's going to happen. You're most likely going to get hit by a ransomware attack. And that seems like a very dramatic statement, but if you think about it, there are ransomware attacks now every 11 seconds. Every 11 seconds. That statistic is just, frightening. as it is. And I think, what we're seeing more and more is that as the rise of data, as data increases exponentially across the globe, people are so dependent on their systems and that access to data. And when it goes away, they can be held back from conducting business or even life-threatening things like not being able to get patient data in a hospital, or as we saw with the Colonial Pipeline, not actually being able to get access to our natural resources. So ransomware it's a real threat. It's happening more and more, and it really is something that everybody needs to be thinking about.
And when we talk about, like, how do they breach? There's all statistics out there, and the percentage, it's really, it comes down to human error, typically, whether it's a negligent employee, it could be the insider threat, but it's typically 85 to 90% of attacks or breaches are caused by human error. So if you could, Simon, like the methods that these attackers use, can you talk about like what they do, phishing, spear phishing, how do they get into these systems?
Well, I'll give everybody a real life example from last night at dinner. I was sitting next to Justin Andres. Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. Who's our chief revenue officer, and Kevin was on my right. And my colleague picked up his phone and he said, "Oh, Simon, you just texted me." I said, "I did." And he said, "Yep, you're asking me for money." And literally what had happened is somebody had used my name. They'd attached a link. They said, "Hey, it's Simon Taylor, the CEO of your company. I need you to wire me money right now. And I need you to click on this link." And obviously a seasoned professional is going to look at that and say, it's probably not Simon. But you imagine if you've got an organization with 2,000 people or even 200 people, there could be a junior employee who really does think that's legitimate. They click on the link, and all of a sudden you're infected. If you're on a network, that infection will then extend into the rest of the network, and it can actually corrupt all of your data almost anywhere. And so I think the criticality here is it's incredibly easy for them to access everything you've got because they only have to get in once. It's one human error that is all they need. And they can try for almost no money over and over and over again to keep hitting you and keep hitting all of your employees using, thousands of different techniques. And those techniques are getting more and more advanced each and every day.
And what happened there, that was, social engineering. They knew Justin works for you, you're the CEO, and they, reached out hoping that Justin would, why are you the money that you're asking for?
That's
Doug, to pull you in here, who are the targets out here? Is it just big companies? Is that what they're going after mainly, or who else are they going after?
It's we've seen actually there was an interview of one of the ransomware subjects that an outlet had conducted that said that they're after US and UK companies because that's where the cyber insurance ecosystem is strongest. So they're targeting organizations and countries that have that ecosystem underlying their companies. I think if anyone is familiar with how network scanning and pen testing works, a lot of these are targets of opportunity. They're not necessarily recon missions that are targeting very surgically a specific sector. That is happening for sure, but I think a lot of the victims that I hear from, they're medium to small size companies. They don't necessarily have they have a very minimal security program, and they just let their security lapse. And they're providing, our remote desktop protocol as a service that is not really used or needed. And ultimately, as you guys just talked about the social engineering aspect, ultimately that's another, very common vector of attack is through the email phishing. So it's, individuals who are susceptible to that and who are willing and can offer to pay that those high dollar amounts.
Yeah, and another piece too, and I'd like you both to give us some examples of like, good stories, on ransomware if you could. But Doug, one of the things that comes up too is, and this pops up with, I think I know the FBI's position, the government's position is don't pay a ransom. Right. So if a company's hit with a ransomware attack, they're told don't pay a ransom, but companies they're unsure what to do. So what's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that is that the paying of the ransom payment, it's not a surprise to hear me say that, we don't encourage it. And we allow the victim to make that decision. As far as what to do, I mean, it's really to take in as much information about the problem as possible, and to start making, learn this from your class, Kevin, data-driven decision making is really where it's at. What can we know? What do we know about this attack? Who's the actors behind it? Do they pay the ransom? Are they, what's the average amount that's been paid to this group? Start to collect that kind of information. And the FBI or any, federal law enforcement organization that's working a ransomware variant, it might be a subject matter expert, can provide that, because that's, again, part of that victim focused response that we're trying to enable the victims to help make that decision if they're faced with it. But certainly paying a ransom can bring about additional problems. There's not a guarantee you'll get your data back. There's a possibility the actor will come back for more money, or to tell the victim they paid too quickly and they want to, paid too quickly and didn't negotiate, so they're going to actually ask for more money in that. So we've seen data get corrupted on the decryption. So it's not a guarantee that you will get it back. But, again, making that decision before the ransomware hits, deciding with your incident response team, what are we going to do when this happens? What are our different scenarios and our contingency plans when it does? These things, should be kind of sorted out ahead of time so that you're not caught off guard when you're trying to make that decision.
Kevin, if I can just
Simon, jump in.
I think the way we break it down, there's kind of three basic categories for preventing ransomware attacks and dealing with them or managing them. We really call it prevention, detection, and remediation. So prevention is simple things like changing your password, multi-factor authentication, all the things that people talk about on a continual basis. How do you stop a ransomware attack from coming in the door? The detection piece is equally important. That's monitoring your systems, monitoring your networks, making sure that you know what's going on. So if you are hit or somebody is trying to come in the door, you know what's going on. But I think the third piece, the remediation, is what gets ignored all the time. So when we think about remediation, you've been struck, a ransomware attack has actually happened. We break it down to kind of three categories. The first is your backup. Obviously we're a backup as a service business, so this is near and dear to our hearts, but making sure that every piece of data is backed up, that's critical. That's table stakes at this point. But the second piece is when it's backed up, where is it backed up to? And is it backed up to what we call mutable storage? So you want write once, read many. You want to make sure that nobody can actually use your backup data and erase it. And then the third piece is what we call flexible recovery, which means that when you're struck with a ransomware attack, the time it takes you to actually get back up and running is critical. We've got friends and colleagues and customers, and we've seen this over and over again, in which, they'll call us up and they'll say, my gosh, the average amount of time after a ransomware attack to get back up and running is 16 days. For all of the folks on the call, imagine your business being shut down for 16 days. And then, a great sort of use case for us and something we're very proud of. We had a customer call us up and say, hey, listen, we can't be out for 16 days. And without, revealing anything about the identity of this customer, this is a large East Coast, 2,000 person plus organization. They were struck with a ransomware attack because they did have Haiku in place, because they did use immutable storage, because everything we build is Linux based. Literally the FBI called us and said, everything is frozen. We can't get to any of the data except what's protected by Haiku. And again, not to turn this into a sale, the idea here is just that when you're thinking about data protection, when you're thinking about, the rules for ransomware protection, don't stop at preventing the attack. Go that extra step and think about, okay, now I've been hit. Am I ready? Will I know that I'm being hit? And am I backed up? And can I recover the data in a really simple way? And can I keep the bad guys out of, the company jewels being our data?
Yeah, and Doug, I'll pass this over to you. And Simon made a good point about data backup. Can you talk a bit, Doug, on this? Is like, everyone thinks, and I'm not saying like everyone, but a lot of people think that, hey, I move everything off my network, I move it up to the cloud, I'm okay. I don't have to worry about anything. All right. It's backed up there. Is that the case?
Possibly no. And you've got to verify that. And if you do have backups, you've got to test your backups and make sure that they're actually backing up what you expecting them to be doing, and not just rely on that for in perpetuity. A lot of the folks that are able to restore from a backup, some find that their backups never actually were backing up the data they intended it to. So if you are in the cloud, whether it's Azure or AWS or Google, you have to really figure out what's being backed up and trust but verify type of situation where you want to do routine backup testing and ensure from the provider that what you're paying for is actually occurring.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And my public advisory to everyone out there too is if you put it in the cloud, you do reduce costs and you might reduce your risk, but the liability stays with you. So whatever you put out there, if there's a breach of that cloud, well, the regulators are coming after you, and so are the plaintiff's attorneys as well. So make sure, and I loved how you put it, Doug, trust but verify. Know what actually have a lawyer review your contract, make sure you know what you're getting, and make sure there's actually a backup involved, and more likely than not, there isn't. So read that. And then my other public service too is when you're paying your ransomware, think of the OFAC advisory that came out there. Really the government, the reason they don't want you paying, and Doug, you tell me where I'm wrong here, paying you that ransomware is you don't know who you're paying. You could be paying a terrorist organization or someone else the government doesn't want you to deal with. And that money could be going to them to come back to harm the United States. Is that accurate, Doug?
Yeah, it's a concern, and it's something to consider when you're making that decision with your incident response team is how are we able to ensure that this, the payment that we're making is not going to a sanctioned country.
Exactly.
And another, just an anecdote about the providers and being up in the cloud. There's some simple requests that we'll make from a victim. One of which would being like an IP addresses of who logged into specific accounts, or some of the back end stuff that when your systems were on premise, there was a much better understanding of what that means. Now that we're in the cloud, some of those logs and some of the kind of the back end of what a system administrator might be doing, some of that gets lost in the shuffle in that transition. So I just wanted to make a call back, Kevin, to that previous comment about the backups. Mm-hmm. It's also not just the backups, it's all that log data that really should be being reviewed and aggregated centralized so that you can actually look at it and it's useful, because that is really what our evidence collection is going to involve is getting a copy of all that log collection. So
that's perfect. Thanks, Doug. Simon, you have anything to jump in on there?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. One of the biggest misnomers I think in the industry is my data's in the cloud, it must be safe, because the cloud's not just going to disappear. Amazon's not going to disappear. And that's true. But what Kevin said at the opening of this webinar is absolutely true as well, which is it's the other deletion. It's the ransomware attacks. It's accidental deletion. So the cloud providers have actually come up with what they call shared responsibility models. And the shared responsibility model really works like this. They have the responsibility to allow you to put your data in their cloud, and you have the responsibility to protect it. So certainly, backup as a service companies like our own Haiku can help you to do that. But the idea is make sure whoever you're using, that you do have a third party that's not the cloud itself, so that there's someone you can go to who's actually looking after that data and making sure that you've got all of the granular recovery requirements in place, and the policies in place to make sure you're actually protected.
Excellent. We got a quick question here. Can a company be liable if it is found out that they made a ransomware payment to a sanctioned organization? Well, I'm not going to give you a legal opinion here, but based on the OFAC advisory, yeah, you could be. It depends if the government wanted to bring an action against you. So there you have it. Yeah, you're not supposed to pay, especially if it's a sanctioned entity. All right, let's move on here. Hey, ransomware, we're watching it it's in the headlines all the time now. And it's not really new. We did a webinar on ransomware last year at this time, and we've done prior. What's changed? Why is it in the news so much right now? And I ask you both this, like, what's been the game changer? Why does it seem like the cyber criminals or whoever they are doing this, however you want to really designate them, why are they so brazen? What's going on?
I'll start the response. I think one of the things to consider is that the attacks have been successful, so they've been able to profit off of these attacks, and that is out there in the criminal enterprises that this crime pays. Ransomware has been around for decades, and I think as our dependencies on technology continues to grow, so does our the threshold of us living without it diminishes. So there's really a need to have that online capability, and to live without it is almost, unfathomable to some organizations. So all those decisions and the impact that it's making financially for the criminals has been a really big boon for their industry.
Yeah, I think there's two other things that I'm seeing a lot, Kevin. One is it's become really simple. So it used to be that if you wanted to perpetrate a ransomware attack, you actually had to be a developer. You had to know how to, create your own ransomware, software, and then launch it. Now you've actually got ransomware as a service, which is a simple platform. You pay a little bit of money, and just like any other, just like getting Salesforce or any SaaS service, you can just go to these, to the dark web, turn these things on, and anyone can become a hacker. So I think the simplicity and ease of use of these horrible, weapons has become really prolific. I think the second piece, though, is the mass migration to cloud. And while I think that's a great thing, and I think that COVID spurred, this massive migration to the public cloud, it also introduced an enormous amount of vulnerabilities for companies. We all had fewer folks in the offices. We were all sort of running like chickens with our heads cut off, trying to figure out, how to survive in this sort of pandemic landscape. And unfortunately, the move to cloud was sometimes done without all the checks and balances, without all the controls in place. And that left a lot of companies exposed. And I think that's still going on today.
That's great. So, no, thanks, Simon. And what I want to turn to next, too, is really ransomware readiness. And, then we're going to tie the FBI back in here. So this is really both of you in here. So, what should organizations be doing to prepare for, respond, and mitigate a cyber attack, a ransomware attack? I always think of it this way. Everyone talks about like, oh, we have our cyber program, we have this. But you go in and you talk to the CEO or whoever, and you say, what happens today if you're hit with a ransomware attack? How ready are you? What do you do? So Simon, why don't you give us some insight on what companies should do when they get asked that question?
So again, PDR, so it's prevention, detection, remediation. So again, first of all, focus on the prevention aspect. It sounds really simple, and it's funny because a lot of CISOs have said to me, I don't mention this in webinars because it's so obvious, but giving out your password is the easiest way for people to get access to your systems. So the more you can lock that down, the more you can use multi-factor authentication. Yes, it's irritating. You're going to have folks in your organization say, why do we have to do this? But the option between that and a ransomware attack, there is no choice. You need to have multi-factor authentication. You must make sure that you are making it harder for the bad actors to get in the front door. The second piece, again, monitor everything, absolutely everything from your networking to all of your data. Invest in things like Sophos, Palo Alto Networks. There's so many vendors out there that have invested in making sure that you'll know when, encrypted attacks are occurring, when something's coming in the front door. But the last piece, and I think this remediation and readiness piece, this is what everybody forgets about. We focused on this a little bit today, which is, making sure you can actually back up the data and recover it. So look, I know that sounds really complicated and there's a lot to do. One of the things we actually developed at Haiku is something that we did in alignment with FireEye, Mandiant, and Carahsoft, as well as SADA, and it's called R-Score.
Yeah, and don't forget Boston College.
Yeah, and Boston College. Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is
Actually,
great. I was going to ask you that too,
yeah,
as I
go
give
ahead.
BC a plug. Yeah, if you could talk a bit about our score, because we were involved in this, our team, over here with, this was like a great venture of academics working with private industry, really to offer a public service to organizations, so they can try to at least get some sense of where they stand and how they can better protect themselves against ransomware.
Well, and this really started with our head of products, Tobias Sunder, a meeting with Kevin Powers, and they were talking about how we can refocus the industry as a whole and all organizations, not just on protecting against an attack, but actually focusing on the recovery aspect. How ready are you to recover your data when you're attacked? And what we jointly created was something called R score, which is like a credit score that rates your ability to recover from a ransomware attack. This is a completely a public service. It's a free service. And it's something that was designed simply to allow any organization anywhere to get a good sense of what that looks like. And if you want, Kevin, I can pull that up on the screen briefly and show folks.
Yeah, if you could do that, briefly, just to give a sense of it. And, it's a pretty cool, software, if I do say so myself.
Let me see if I can actually do this. Okay. Is that pulling up?
Yeah, we can see it.
So this is our score, powered by Haiku, but in collaboration with obviously Boston College, as well as SADA, Mandiant, and Carahsoft and others. And the idea, very simply, is to prepare you to recover from a ransomware attack. And just like a credit score, you go through, you answer questions about your backup process, about your networking process, your infrastructure, and your servers. And then at the end, it's going to give you a score. And that score is 0 to 1,000, much like a credit score. But the value of this is that it's not just giving you a number. It will then allow you to go through and see how you can actually improve your score. And you can also print out the results. We don't email it to you. We don't collect any information about who you are. We in no way store any of this data because we don't want to own your vulnerabilities. We don't want this to turn into another source of weaknesses for a company. So this is a great way for any organization anywhere to get better prepared for a ransomware attack and to really understand, where their vulnerabilities lie.
No, thanks for sharing that, Simon, and thanks for including Boston College in that. That was like really
Always
cool of you to do that. And so now I'm going to throw it back to you, Doug. And we talked about this earlier, but I always think, and I always ask you this question, hey, if I'm representing a company and I'm outside counsel, I'm the counsel, and I get hit with a data breach, like we're hit, and I call the FBI, I call you. And my question to you is like, hey, Doug, we just got hit with the breach. We need help. What do you guys do? What do you do specifically? Oh, I think you're on mute again, Doug.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think the first thing we would do is definitely want to make sure that you as the victim or as the representing the victim, that the victim is able to recover and stop, because they stop the bleeding. Like
right.
Isolate the machines that we think are infected. If there's backups, make sure that they're not connected to what's been corrupted already, and then engage and begin your incident response plan that you hopefully have had time to practice and exercise and
make sure it's up to date.
Thank you. Yeah. The FBI is going to be part of that plan, but we're not going to be the group that comes in to conduct incident response on behalf of the victims. We have really a mission to look externally from the organization out to where these adversaries are attacking from, and through the cyber ALAT program, where we have agents at the embassies that'll work with local law enforcement in those countries to help identify and investigate these crimes overseas. We've got significant the subject matter experts throughout the FBI in these field offices to start to pass these indicators over to and kind of develop additional context for the incident response team. So, I think the best advice I can give is, allow us to be part of that plan. we're not gonna ever make demands of the victim, but we'll ask some questions, and they'll most likely be technical in nature. We'll want to know about attack vectors, folders, files that are being identified, on the system. We'll want to start to put this picture together of what happened, and we are a piece of that puzzle. And not only are we the resource for the victims, but sometimes those victims have a piece that we're looking for on our end, because not every victim has all of the information about the system state at the time of the attack. So we try to what we're doing is piecing those different victim indicators together to come up with a full picture. So I think we want to know as soon as the victim is ready to engage us. We can work directly with the victim if they don't have representation. But what we'll do is at a time that's convenient for the victim, we can start to get those indicators and go to work with conduct our investigation both with FBI agents and federal law enforcement partners, and then starting to work overseas. And depending on the maturity of the case, we might be able to include that victim, that evidence as part of something that might be ongoing at the time. So, again, the most important thing is we won't make demands of the victim. We're going to stay victim focused. We do want to obtain that evidence, and there might be an ask to push it out in an unattributed fashion, push out some of those indicators to the security community to help victims defend themselves, in the future after the attack has been mitigated.
Yeah, and Doug, on that too, what's important to understand is you're there treating the company that's hit or the organization that's hit. They're a victim, right? And you're there to help them, but you're not there to help them in a sense of you want to find the bad guys or the bad people who are doing these things. You're not there to help them get their systems up and running, right? That's
it's not that we don't want to. I mean, a lot of our agents have come from that incident response world, and so they are capable of doing so. As anyone would imagine, there's a lot of other issues that start to come up when we do get on the keyboard and start helping the victims, which we'll do our best to conduct that response, and we'll offer possibly some suggestions, but it really is going to be dependent on the agent and their expertise and their background. So what we are trained to do and what we can do is come on site and triage the victim systems, kind of get a collection of logs that we can either email out to our colleagues or bring back to the office and conduct analysis there. Rarely in the past, there's been kind of a sense of let's go on site and let's image the machines, let's image the hard drives and take these forensic copies. And that is just too long. I mean, by the time we get those back and that analysis gets completed, we're weeks and months into the recovery, and now the victim just wants it to go away. So we have a capability of taking some initial indicators. We work with state and local and federal partners, and we work as a team to make that happen. I think a couple good resources from the government. CISA has put together a list of bad practices, which you can find on their website. They link to a GitHub discussion that talks about you guys. We've been talking about best practices long enough. Now let's talk about some bad practices that you need to change from.
That's one of my questions.
And then the other CISA, it's actually a CISA resource, but that the FBI and other local or other law enforcement contribute to. It's stopransomware.gov, and those are two resources that are kind of central to the proactive approach to protecting themselves.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, Doug. And Simon, when we talk about the ransomware attack, and you talk about our score and all you're doing there, really what is kind of, when you think of this, it's not a matter of, and we've been saying this forever, it's not a matter of, if, it's a matter of when. And you're probably already, I think Director Comey said that years ago, it's like those who have been hit and those who have been hit just don't know it, right? So with the ransomware, our score, it's really giving you a sense of, how are you going to react and respond? Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes, and it's how you prepare your environment, right? So I see a lot of questions in the chat about MFA and two-factor authentication and whether you should just use your cell phone, et cetera. I think getourScore.org, one of the reasons we didn't commercialize this is we truly believe that there's a moral imperative for companies in our industry to band together and start helping the community at large to prepare themselves for these attacks. So if you go to getourScore.org, get the letter R, score.org, it's a very, very simple and easy process, takes about 10 minutes. And at the end of that, you're going to actually have a full audit, a full report that tells you exactly how you can improve your policies and procedures in your company and prevent or create an ability to recover from a ransomware attack.
When you say that too, is there's the risk. You always talk about risk. That's what cyber is, the cyber risk. I look at one of the biggest risks out there right now is not only what you're doing to protect the data, it's how you respond after the fact, because you're going to have the regulators, you're going to have the plaintiffs' attorneys, you have everyone coming after you to look. So you're not judged on just how you protect it or what resources you had there. It's how you handle. So you could have the best practices in running because you are going to get hit. It's how you handle and react, recover, and get back to operational readiness. That's really how you're going to be judged. Am I?
Absolutely right, Kev. Couldn't have said it better.
All right. Let me go here because we only have about 10 minutes left. We talked about, the worst practices. Can we talk about for instance, what are some best practices? You have people here right now, some might be CISOs, some are lawyers, some are students, some are actually faculty, or they're running a small business and they don't have an IT department. They're unsure what to do. If I'm starting from scratch, and hopefully no one's starting from scratch, but what are some of those best practices companies should be doing? And Doug, I'll throw this to you, just in a general sense. If you're a company right now, I'm a small company of 5 or 6 people, what should I be doing to protect my environment?
Well, there's been some great discussion, and I think Simon said something about monitoring earlier, which if you've got 5 or 6 people that may be kind of out of scope of what you're able to accomplish, you really should be maintaining an inventory of the devices that are connecting to your network, to your company, and understanding how your network is set up. So even just a diagram of what your network looks like, and then an inventory of what devices are connect to that network. Or touch the data that we want to try to protect. The other thing would be turning off remote desktop protocol and hardening your system with there's a website out there that maybe we can push out in the chat at some point, but it essentially is a way that you can take an operating system and come up with a level 1 way or a configuration for that operating system that you can harden the system, so that we're not just default installing operating systems and throwing them online and putting them, attaching them to the internet. And the other issue is really just training and awareness. I mean, employees of companies may or may not know about the things that we're talking about because we're in the industries and we deal with this on a daily basis. It's very familiar to us. But social engineering and the concept of phishing and how to verify, voice verifying, transactions and money transfers. Something we've not talked about is business email compromise, which is still a very common.
Doug, okay, first off, what's a email compromise? What's a business email
BEC
compromise?
is BECs or business email compromise is really this a little bit. There's multiple variations of it. But really what it's about is obtaining the targeting personnel at a company who may have access to either the executive suite or the money, the bank accounts, and attacking them with social engineering attempts to really try to either take over their email or get them to do something under the kind of guise that under the trickery of the criminal. So I didn't explain that very well.
But no, you did, and that's what, like, Simon had the business text compromise last night.
Exactly. Yeah. Something I bring up in a lot of my presentations I'll do is, on our iPhone, or at least my iPhone that I use for my personal life, if I look in my mail client, my name and the names of the senders of the emails are just, they're just we call them display names. It's not the email address. So when I receive an email, I'm just looking at the name that came from until I really, click on that name and start to dig down and see what email it came from. So, techniques like that the criminals take advantage of that are meant to be easy for us to use the technology. They're really exploited. And, that email phishing and the email social engineering attempts, they work. And, Simon, as much success as he's had, I'm sure there's articles and there's LinkedIn's and there's, media out there that really explain what he's doing and who his contacts are. And so, coming up with a story that why Simon might be contacting you, as you saw in the dinner last night, it's not too far-fetched.
No, and and I'll throw this out there too, is what's important to understand. I mean, last year I remember we talked, it's like, oh, everyone's like forced home. Well, no one's going back. That's, and it's not because of COVID. It's this now that people have set up, and we found that people can work from home. And Simon and Doug, like, what can companies do now? Before, at least you had everyone around the perimeter. Everyone's outside the perimeter right now. What can companies do in the next 5 minutes, if you could tell us, to protect themselves and protect their employees, while they're at home working, because they're going to be there for good, or at least 3 days a week anyways.
I mean, really simply, I put it in 3 categories, especially for companies, like you say, that might not have, 5 to 10 IT personnel and a CISO, et cetera. Those can feel like real luxuries for smaller and mid-sized companies, and even some larger ones. Number one, just limit the password handout. One of the things we see all the time with smaller companies, but really everywhere, is that you have this openness to handing out passwords to everyone. The risks that you're taking when you hand out administrator passwords in particular, you cannot reinforce that point enough. Keep it to a very, very, very small group of people. 2 is turn on that multi-factor authentication. Make sure that it's a little bit more difficult to get in. Anything you can do across not just your own applications, but think about SaaS. So a lot of companies today are using Salesforce for CRM. They might be using, something that's a SaaS service for accounting. All of that information, the bad actors want to get. They want to get it, they want to use it, they want to exploit it, and they want to turn that into a ransom attack. So make sure that, when you turn on a SaaS service, that your employees are protecting it through that multi-factor authentication. And the third thing I would say, and it sounds really simple, but is hire professionals. There are so many firms out there, MSPs, MSSPs, service providers that are entirely focused on protecting companies your size. Find one, leverage that level of expertise to make sure that all of these solutions and software packages and monitoring tools that we talked about are a part of your tech stack and your tech environment.
Excellent. And I love it in the chat box right now. They're not asking questions. People are giving advice to each other. It's pretty cool.
Right.
But Kaylee just said, use a VPN, exclamation point. Yes, we agree. Great work.
Kevin, I'll also add too, if some of the smaller, some of the smaller to mid-sized companies, there's the ransomware mitigation is expensive, and I've seen it firsthand. And if you can't afford to, you have to kind of think that through ahead of time. And I don't want to over exaggerate our involvement, because I just spoke about how we're not going to come in and conduct incident response, which we will not. But we are a free service. You can call us and have a conversation. All the agents that I work with are well versed in cybersecurity. They understand these issues, and they also talk to other victims. So we want the relationship with those potential victims ahead of time. And if you're seeing something that might look like it's suspicious, or you want to verify it, certainly call the FBI, Secret Service, HSI. Get in touch with the federal law enforcement, and they may be able to help direct you to someone who can help out further.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the cost. I mean, the highest amount paid on a ransom this year, I think it was CNA, was $40 million. And then I have the stat here. The average requested in 2018 was $5,000, and now it's around $200,000. just in 3 years. So it's costly. And then, we've talked about, the cost of a data breach is somewhere just on the average in a small business is 3.9 million. The bigger you get, if you're over 500 million, not 500 million, 50 million records, it's somewhere about $392 million for cost of a breach. So it's very costly. So you got to take care of these things up front. All right, we went over some best practices. Do you have any advice on like what not to do?
Remote desktop protocol, I brought that up before. If you don't know what it is, it's a way that you can access a computer while you're working from home. There's you essentially log into a work computer. Some companies or organizations that use that are not using multi-factor authentication, which is a big mistake. And they're allowing access to all the employees, which probably is not a good idea. So if you are using RDP, or if you're not sure, ask someone, figure out how to make that happen. And make sure that we're defending that, because that's ultimately with email phishing, those two most common vectors of ransomware attacks is via RDP and through email phishing.
Excellent. Simon.
Don't assume that you can get your data back and recover it if you're not sure. Very simply, we hear this so often. It's a terrible shame. People call and they say, I really want to invest in Haiku and I need backup as a service for all of my public cloud data. By the way, can you get my data back, please? Because we just lost it. Don't wait until it's too late. Get out ahead of it. Make sure you understand what you need to do to protect yourself and protect your data. Make sure everything is recoverable, and make sure you know who the vendors are that can help you in a situation like this. Don't wait until the end and it's too late to fix it.
Excellent. And my takeaway from what you guys just went through is, one, training. Make sure you train your employees. Make sure they understand what their role is in cybersecurity, because it is part of their job. Two, monitor. I had detect and then back up your data. So there you go. And what's really important too, and this is what we stress to the program, is that to understand that cybersecurity shouldn't be siloed. It's not a tech issue solely. It's actually a risk management enterprise business issue that has to run from the top down. It needs to be managed from the top down and across the enterprise. Whether you're in legal, you're in the business group, you're in HR, you're working the front desk, cybersecurity is your job, and you need to actually protect this data and be focused, whether you're at home or in the office. So with that, I want to thank, Doug for coming here, supervisory special agent, and Professor Doug Doman for taking the time to do this. Doug, we always appreciate everything you do. And of course, Simon, thank you so much for taking the time to be part of our webinar series. We appreciate everything. And we'll see both of you again in March at Boston College for the Boston Conference on Cybersecurity. We're going to be back at it. We'll be in Gasson Hall, and we look forward to seeing everyone there if you can get a ticket and get in. So with that, thank you, everyone, for taking the time to participate. We're up next in October for our next webinar on managing cybersecurity risk, designing and implementing an effective governance, risk management, and compliance program. We have Dell EMC's Phil Aldrich, who is the Director of Enterprise Risk Management and Governance, Risk and Compliance at Dell, and also a professor here at Boston College, and surprisingly, he teaches GRC. And then we have CyberSaint's Patrick O'Reilly, who is the co-founder and chief product officer for CyberSaint and that product, CyberStrong. So with that, we'll see everyone next time, and thank you for your time, and thanks again. Go Eagles. Take care.